Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us on today's show is beat writer Aaron McMan from MLive. First, my view from Section 17 to get us started. I only had a few worries heading into Saturday's game. One, after 3 highly emotional weeks, would we be focused? The answer was yes. My other worry was keeping Shea Patterson healthy for this Saturday, and for those guys down in Columbus next Saturday. Jim and Pep had a really nice game plan that didn't call for Shea to run much, and the offensive line took very good care of him in pass protection. As a matter of fact, I don't think he even was touched. So mission accomplished on both of those counts. Indiana hasn't beaten us since 1987. We've won the last 22 games. Now that doesn't mean we've blown them out 22 times. The last 3 years have been very close battles. If you'll recall, last year we ended up going to overtime down there before we won. The message is always the same. Respect your opponent and stay focused. This team has done that beautifully. But now we are one step away from something every Michigan fan wants and has been waiting to see for so long, beating Ohio State in the season finale in their house in the biggest game between these two teams since 2006. Now see, even I'm losing focus. First, we have to take care of business against Indiana on Saturday, and they will come to play, believe you me. And hopefully we can avoid any injuries of consequence this Saturday. My guest today thinks this Michigan team has the mental makeup that doesn't allow them to overlook any opponent, and I agree with him. Beat writer Aaron McMan is up next here on the Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Here with us on our game day edition this week as we take a look back at the Rutgers game and ahead to Saturday, a cold Saturday game, the home finale in the Big House. Beat writer Aaron McMan from MLive. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm good, Mike. Good to be back.
Well, Michigan was expected to win on Saturday, Aaron, against Rutgers, and despite that slow start, mission accomplished.
Yeah. I thought he looked good on both sides of the ball. You mentioned the slow start, and we were talking with Nico Collins afterwards, and he acknowledged it. He thought maybe they got a little slow off the start there. But at the end they played well. The offense put it together. I thought Shea Patterson, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later on, but I thought Shea Patterson had one of his best games of the season, just top to bottom. And then the defense, they gave up that one touchdown run. There at the end of the first quarter, the 80-yard run. But other than that, I thought they did a good job against Rutgers. I was real impressed with Rutgers quarterback, Artur Sitkowski. He's only a freshman. He's got a good arm. But I thought Michigan handled him well.
Well, as you said, it was a slow start. And I think if we're nitpicking about things this season, that's one thing you hear fans talk about. Why do we get off to a slow start in so many games? But it was pretty apparent from the get-go, Rutgers was going to load up that box and do everything they could to stop the run or slow it down. But Jim turned to Shea, turned him loose, and that was probably, as you just mentioned, his best performance from top to bottom this year, Aaron.
Yeah, I thought so. He was clean. I think he was 18 of 27 for 260 and 3 touchdowns. And perhaps more importantly, and I've been beating the drum now for the last couple of weeks, he hasn't thrown an interception now, I think, in 4 games. So, now he's thrown the ball quite a bit, but he's been accurate, and he hasn't turned the ball over. When you ask someone to handle the ball and throw it as much as he has, mistakes are going to happen. And there really hasn't been a ton of them. Between the receivers not really dropping balls, I think we saw one this past Saturday. I think it was Nico Collins. But, and Jim Harbaugh's made the comment now over the last few weeks, the receivers have done a good job of the season as a whole of not dropping the ball. So, Shea looked very good. I think Pro Football Focus graded him out as the best quarterback in the country on Saturday or this weekend. And they thought it was his best game of the season. I thought he's very good. They didn't ask him to run the ball at all, which I went back in the stats and looked at his college career. This is the first time in his college career he never did it. He never ran the football. No carries, no attempts. So it was interesting take. But yeah, Michigan, they tried to get the run game established there early on. Had some trouble, like you mentioned. Rutgers was loading up and obviously trying to take that away from Michigan. But they responded just fine. Shea threw the ball around. Receivers caught the ball. We continue to see Shea and the offense get several different receivers involved. I think they now have seven different receivers who have caught touchdown passes this season. So all in all, it was a good showing from the offense, I thought.
It's just becoming more apparent each week what a great fit he is for the offense. And you mentioned how well he's been taking care of the ball, Aaron. I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but he only has 3 picks on the season, doesn't he?
That's right, yeah. He's completed, I think, 67% of his passes. So, when you break that down, I think he's had 200 attempts this season, and he's only thrown 3 interceptions. He's completing 2 out of every 3. I think, given Michigan's struggles on offense last season, I think they would have taken that in a heartbeat, and I think you would have seen a different offense last year. But it's amazing what a competent, efficient, effective quarterback will do for a team.
Well, absolutely. I mean, last year, if we would have run into this kind of a defensive scenario where they're just going to load up the box on us, it might have been a pound it the rest of the day. But so nice to see that, okay, we wanted to run the ball, couldn't get it done with them loading the box up, so turn to Shea. That is the big difference, isn't it, this year?
It is. His arm has been, the difference maker. And then it's something we talked about when he first came in. We'd seen the highlight tapes and looked at the stat sheets, and, he'd thrown for 300 and 400 yards at Ole Miss and, kind of did what he wanted. And he was effective doing it. But, when you throw him into Jim Harbaugh's system, like they have, they've taken a little bit away from him, but at the same time, they've been able to allow him to, make a play when he sees one open. They've entrusted him a lot with this offense. Jim's kind of given him almost free rein in some respects, and so if he sees a opening, he's able to go and run for it, or he throws the ball. He's been a huge difference maker for this offense, and obviously Michigan got its running backs back this season, so that made a difference as well. But Shea, by and large, has been the X factor for Michigan's offensive improvement this year.
Well, in the running game, Karan went over the 1,000-yard mark, which we were all glad to see. But Chris Evans and True Wilson got their share of carries also on Saturday, Aaron. It might not have been spectacular, but it was good, hard running from all 3 backs.
Yeah, it looks like Chris Evans is healthy again. It sounds like he's dealing with a hamstring injury there for the few weeks he was out. This is now 2 weeks in a row where he's gotten, I think, over 10 carries per game. Michigan seems comfortable giving him the football, which is, I think, a good thing, considering, the sheer volume of carries Karan Higdon has gotten this season. I went back and I was looking at his numbers last night, and, he's well over 200 already for the season. He had, 180 all of last year. And keep in mind, Karan missed a game earlier this year as well. So between the load that Karan's gotten, it's nice to see Chris kind of get involved as well and kind of share some of those carries. And then you mentioned Drew Wilson, who was a name that kind of came up in spring and then again in fall camp. The former walk-on, he's really impressed. Jim's very impressed with his hard-nosed mentality. He's improved his I guess his speed and his vision on the field. They really like him. He's a short, stout guy, but he's got a lot of power behind him. He's almost like a kind of smaller, and to me, he's almost like a smaller version of Ben Mason. He's not afraid to hit people. He's not afraid to get an extra few yards if he needs them. But right now, Michigan's running game is humming.
Well, as we mentioned, the running game did start slowly, and we know why again. Rutgers was loading up that box, but after the passing game backed them off, Aaron, that offensive line again was just so solid, weren't they?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times watching the game on Saturday, I was thinking to myself, how much time that Shea had in the pocket. He was sitting back there for 4, 5, 6 seconds. He had all day to throw. I think if they would have let him run, I think he would have had some openings there and gotten some yards. But no, the offensive line's been, and I've said this now for a few weeks now, the offensive line has been the biggest I think surprise to everyone following this team, watching this team. We thought they'd make some improvements just because most of the group was back this year. It sounded like they were a more confident group, new coach. It sounded like the offensive scheme was simplified a little bit for them. But they've jumped quite a bit. They've done a good job not only protecting Shea Patterson but opening up holes with the run game. The run game, that wasn't much of a problem last year. Michigan was able to obviously get some yards against some inferior teams, but they run the ball well against good defenses too, and that's been the biggest surprise. They rushed for over 300 yards against Michigan State. They ran well against Penn State. Their holes, and then Shea's had time to throw the ball, and that was the big thing last year. The quarterbacks didn't have a ton of time to throw the ball. A lot of sacks. Sacks and penalties and tackles for losses have been cut down drastically this year. And I think that's an ode to not only the offensive line, which is I thought played very well, and they've remained healthy too, which has been key. But their new coach, Ed Warner, I think he's done a fantastic job, and he's probably been the unsung hero, so to speak, of this season.
Well, amen to that. I don't think anyone will disagree with that point. Over on the defensive side, though, Aaron, sort of a mixed bag for the defensive line. They gave up 193 yards on the ground. Got gashed by Isaiah Pacheco, who's got some wheels on that 80-yard touchdown run. But in the end, the damage was minimal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I wrote yesterday. They did the 193 yards on the ground for Rutgers was a season high for Michigan, kind of giving up. I don't think they were particularly bad, but they weren't, necessarily on top of their game either on Saturday. I don't know if that it's chalked up to them just, maybe because it was Rutgers, or maybe Rutgers came out and had a really good game, or, I don't know what it was, but, it is what it is. Like you said, the damage was minimal. They didn't give up a ton of big plays other than Isaiah Pacheco run you mentioned. They didn't get any sacks. They only had a couple of big tackles for loss. But Rutgers was struggling most of the game on offense anyway. It was clear and apparent that they need some help out in receiver, and then they got some good backs. But Michigan handled them well, I thought, and at the end of the day, only gave up 7 points. The thing I'm going to be curious to watch going into Indiana on Saturday is whether they can kind of respond from that. And I think they will. But if Indiana gashes them for some big yards on Saturday, then maybe there's concern there. But right now, I'm kind of a wait and see thing.
Just about everyone was out of position on that big run by Pacheco, being as aggressive as always, but just out of position. The linebacking core was nowhere to be seen on that long run, other than chasing Pacheco. But I thought overall they were pretty darn solid too, Aaron. Pass coverage from the linebackers was very good Saturday.
It was, yeah. The linebackers and the defensive backs, I thought, did a very good job. Like I mentioned earlier, I was really impressed with Rutgers' quarterback. He's got a good arm, and they did a good job of kind of keeping him in check. They didn't complete a ton of passes. I think they had an interception there with Ambry Thomas. So they did a good job, I thought. And that's been a strength of this defense. Again, going back to a couple of years ago, the secondary and even the linebacking group. They've been a shutdown group. They haven't given up a ton of yards to quarterbacks, especially in the Big Ten. And that's been one of the bigger reasons for Michigan's success defensively. The one criticism against this group is obviously giving up big plays, that they've been prone to doing that on occasion. But as long as you minimize that, and you saw that Saturday against Rutgers where they really only had that one big play, His defense is going to keep this Michigan team in the game, almost every week.
Man, the secondary was so good on Saturday. You had Brad Hawkins stepping into play, Ambry Thomas having to come in for Levert. So nice to have depth because they graded out pretty well, didn't they, Aaron?
It is, yeah. They did grade out very well. I think Jalen Kelly-Powell got some playing time as well. You mentioned Ambry Thomas in his first career interception. It sounds like Michigan's, like you mentioned, a little banged up. I suspect that Josh Metellus will play Saturday. It sounded like, and Jim said this after the game, but it sounded like Josh could have played. He was dressed in uniform and on the sideline. They had him for an emergency situation, but opted not to play him. But Levert will be a different case. These concussion things are weird because, guys could clear concussion protocol in a couple of days and be eligible to play, or it may take them, a week or 2 weeks, like we saw last year with Brandon Peters, where he sat out a little bit. So it comes and goes. I guess we probably won't know until maybe later in the week, at least on Levert. But yeah, they've done a very good job. It's one of the deeper groups on the defense, deeper units, I guess, on the defense, the secondary. Like a lot of guys back there, a lot of experienced guys as well. So it's again that speaks volumes, I think, to this offense and obviously this defense and the group that Don Brown and Mike Zordich and Chris Partridge have kind of built.
And it was nice to see Rashawn Gary get as much playing time as he did, Aaron. He might not be 100%, but he looks close enough, doesn't he?
Yeah, it was a homecoming for him too. So I think he definitely, it's one of those games where he's going back to New Jersey, his home, and I know he had a lot of family and friends and high school, folks there and everything else. And I'm sure he really wanted to play. It's been a while. It's been, over a month now where he's really played a full game and played, several snaps. And he looked good. There was a funny moment after the game in the post-game press conference where I think a reporter asked him about his shoulder and everything, and he kind of did this motion with his shoulder, moving it around so everyone can see, and he basically asked everyone, how do you think it looks? And he said he feels fine. He told us last week, I think he felt 100%. Whether or not that is the case, I don't know, but he clearly feels well enough to play, and I think. Anytime you have Rashawn Gary on your defense, I think it's a good sign for you.
Well, one of the questions I had going into Saturday's game was, can Michigan stay focused, especially after the 3 previous games leading up to Rutgers? And it turned out that was not at all a concern, was it, Aaron?
No, other than that first quarter, I thought they were fine. There weren't a ton of penalties. It wasn't like they got frustrated or anything else. It's clear that this group is a confident one. We've seen that in the previous weeks now with that revenge tour and the way some of these games have ended up. But they've got to focus. They've said from day one that their goal is to win the Big Ten championship, and I think they realize, to do that, you can't overlook some of these inferior teams like Rutgers and Indiana. You've got to go out and play a full 4 quarters, play well, and be consistent. Because if you don't, you're going to hear about it, on Sunday, Monday for the coaching staff, especially Don Brown, who. He doesn't like giving up points, doesn't giving up like a ton of yards. So yeah, it's they realize their goals are in front of them. They know what they want, and they can't afford really to slip up.
One of the other questions I think a lot of us had on Saturday was, who is Shea's backup? I'm not sure what's going on there. Are you, Aaron?
I'm not either. It's interesting. And, you've got Brandon Peters, obviously, the guy who started 4 games last year for Michigan. It seems like he is technically the number 2. He was the second quarterback in. Saturday against Rutgers, he's been the number 2 pretty much, other than before Dylan went down, and he was number 2 and early on the season. So it seems like he's number 2, but then Joe Milton, we've heard a lot about him, going back to spring, the fall, about his arm strength and everything else. We haven't seen him throw a pass yet, but he has some mobility that Brandon does not. He's young. It sounds like the coaching staff likes him. The only question mark with him is obviously the red shirt and what they want to do with him. He's now played in 2 games because he got in the game at Rutgers as well. He was the 3rd quarterback in, 3 of 4. And they've got 2 games left before they have to make a decision on whether they want to burn his red shirts. Jim Harbaugh has said that they want to try and preserve it. However, if God forbid, if Shea Patterson goes down to a serious injury, then Michigan has a decision to make. Who is the second best quarterback? Who do they think is the most, able to lead this offense? To me, at least from the outside perspective, you think it'd be Peters based on his experience and playing ability and everything else. But it sounds like that those two are closer than maybe some folks think. I think everyone had this idea that, Peter should be the outright number 2, but, Milton saw one drive, Peter saw one drive. We even saw the walk on Michael Sessa late in the game, I think the final 2 plays of the Rutgers game. But right now it seems like Peters is number 2 and Milton is number 3.
With us here on our Game Day segment this week is beat writer Aaron McMan from MLive. Well, Aaron, turning our attention to this Saturday, 5-5, Indiana comes to town for the home finale, Senior Day, all of the good stuff that comes along with that. And thank you, Fox Sports, for a 4 p.m. kickoff, which you may as well say is going to be a night game, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, because the sun's going down now. Gosh, closer to 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock now. So, yeah, the second half will definitely be played under the lights Saturday.
Well, the last 3 years, the Hoosiers, despite not being a great team, have played Michigan very tough there and here. And they're sort of a hot and cold team. They just came off, I think, a 4-game losing streak, beat Maryland in a wild one on Saturday. So staying focused, again, is going to be important, Aaron. You just can't mess around with this team, especially knowing what you have next.
No, you can't. While this Indiana team is struggling in some regard, I do think it's a better quality opponent than what we saw at Rutgers. They've got some good pieces back. Like you mentioned, they played Michigan close the last few years. They've shown potential to play well this year. You mentioned their 4-game losing streak, but they played a Maryland team that has some good wins as well. They beat them. They handled Rutgers this final of the week. They had a win over Virginia earlier in the year. Virginia's on the verge, I think, of getting in the top 25. So this Indiana team has shown that they can play well. They can play well as good teams. But yeah, you're right. They're going to have to stay focused. They're going to have to keep their eye on the prize. And thankfully, I think for Michigan, this game does come at home, because if you keep in mind, you go back to last year, Michigan was expected to win that game in Indiana last year pretty handily, and ended up going overtime, and it was Indiana darn near pulled the upset. So it's a game Michigan can't overlook. I think some folks would maybe look at this as quote unquote a trap game potentially. But given Michigan's their focus the last month or so, and not overlooking opponents, I think they'll just be just fine. You
mentioned a trap game. I mean, Michigan is an early 27.5-point favorite, which is just absolutely ludicrous. We've won 22 in a row against Indiana. The last time they beat us was in 1987. We all talk about not looking ahead. I think that's a very difficult thing to do. I know the fans are already looking ahead. To keep the players focused on Indiana will be the most important thing. The other thing is health. It is paramount that Michigan comes out of this game without many injuries.
Yeah, they're looking okay right now. We mentioned earlier this week on Lavert Hill, Josh Patelis, I would be shocked if he doesn't play on Saturday. Michigan has Rashawn Gary obviously back and healthy. Tariq Black is back and healthy. By and large, I was talking with someone about this the other day, but by and large, Michigan's been a really healthy team this year. Knock on wood. They haven't had a ton of injuries, season-ending injuries like you saw last year. Their key players on both sides of the ball have pretty much played almost every snap of every game. So it's that you're right. They need to come out of this game. Obviously, they want to win, and they want to win comfortably. But at the same token, if you're able to build that lead in the second half, and when we saw this Saturday against Rutgers, Jim's able to put in the second and third stringers, not only get them some more reps and playing time, but preserve those other guys for the following week, obviously, which everyone is, anticipating against Ohio State, which likely will determine the Big Ten East.
Well, and as we touched on just a minute ago, keeping Shea Patterson healthy is, as well as everyone else, minimal bumps and bruises, that is paramount. Speaking of that backup quarterback situation, I know that Dylan McCaffrey has the broken collarbone. I think last week Jim even mentioned that he's not sure that Dylan won't be back. Is that what you heard too?
Yeah, I asked him a question whether he expected Dylan back for the end of the year, and he said he didn't think so. So it sounds like they're not expecting him back. Okay. I guess I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's, comes back healthy, but maybe in preparation for a bowl game. But it sounds like, I don't know. I guess I don't know the recovery time on a broken collarbone. I know usually it doesn't require surgery, but oftentimes your arm ends up in a sling for an extended period of time. So I don't know on a timetable. Jim didn't provide one, But I would be surprised if we saw Dylan healthy and able to play before the end of the year.
Well, a final question for you, Aaron. Let's just say Michigan takes care of business against Indiana Saturday, and I have no doubt that Ohio State is not going to do their part down in Maryland. I know Maryland's got some offense, but I just cannot see them beating Ohio State. If that all happens like we think it's going to, what a hype week we will have next week, Aaron. It might not be as big as the number 1, number 2 matchup in 2006, but it's not going to be far behind, is it?
No, it won't be. Everyone's been looking forward to this game for most of the season. Just, I think, from Michigan's perspective, just for a revenge, factor, and it's notwithstanding this revenge tour. But it's been a long time since Michigan's not only beaten Ohio State, but beaten Ohio State in Columbus. I think 2000 was the last time, and we've seen this story play out before, just a couple of years ago, where Michigan needed to beat the Buckeyes in Columbus to get in the Big Ten championship game and potentially a playoff, and they weren't able to. But it ended up being a heck of a game. Close finish there at the end, and I suspect we'll probably see another situation. November 24th in Columbus. Right now, early odds makers have Michigan. They're pegging Michigan as a 3.5-point favorite against the Buckeyes, which is interesting. So that tells me, obviously, it's going to be a home game for the Buckeyes. They'll have momentum, as will Michigan, assuming both teams win out here. But yeah, it's going to be kind of an all-or-nothing thing for both teams, really. The winner's will win the East, get a berth in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, you've got Northwestern waiting, but assuming whoever wins that the East title gets in the Big Ten championship game, they'll probably win it, and then it's playoffs. So it's going to be a big game. Everything will be riding on it. Emotions will be high, obviously. But you can't ask for much more on the final week of the regular season either.
But first things first, and that's taking care of business this week against Indiana in the Big House. My guest today on our Game Day show has been beat writer Aaron McMan from MLive. Aaron, it's always a pleasure, and we look forward to having you back soon, hopefully to talk playoffs.
Absolutely, Mike. Always glad to do it.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, as Aaron and I discussed, it has been a remarkably healthy year for us. We need to keep it that way, especially at quarterback. Lavert Hill is in concussion protocol. It's different with every player, so it doesn't do any good to try and figure out when he'll be back. He will be back when he's cleared, and only then. Kwity Paye hurt his funny bone on Saturday. That's what Jim said at his presser on Monday. But he will be back on Saturday, as will Aubrey Solomon, who actually was not injured but sick with what must have been a virus or the flu. Jim took the opportunity Monday to remind everyone to get their flu shot too. He also said Tariq Black was progressing very nicely in his comeback and is doing the things he can do as far as route running that won't put too much pressure on the outside of his foot. As of today, entering Week 11, we couldn't hope or pray to be in any better shape. Thanks again to my guest today, beat writer Aaron McMan from MLive. On Thursday's Visitors segment, my guest will be Indiana play-by-play legend Don Fisher. He has been the football and basketball voice of the Hoosiers now for 46 years. So make sure you tune in on Thursday for Don. That will do it for this week's Game Day show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Make sure you come back on Thursday for the Visitors Edition. Until then, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!